topic, evolution of consciousness. Sometimes we call it subjective evolution of consciousness, to contrast it with the present theory, modern theory of Darwin's evolution, which is the objective evolution, or the evolution of bodies, right? Darwin's theory was that it started from some singular cellular organism, and then by random mutations and natural selection, the various forms of life evolved on the earth. That's quite an amazing conception, actually, when you think of it, how a bacterium could become a bear. What kind of process must it have to go through? From a material perspective, it seems quite impossible. And of course, no mechanism has actually ever been proposed for how that process could have occurred. So we generally consider Darwin's theory of evolution to be mostly a theory. And of course, they have evidences of fossils and various, what do you call that, antibacterial resistance that they claim is evidence for evolution. But a real mechanism of how the whole process could have occurred seems quite unbelievable. And so another perspective is needed, I think, and actually understanding how the varieties of life, or the different species of life, have come about. That may be more practical and more, reasonable for, I think, a rational person. To think that randomness or chance could be the cause of, a developmental progression in life forms seems very, it's not real actual scientific explanation. If you say, yes, it happened by chance. Whole purpose of science is to try to find the mechanism, no? Is to try to establish what is the systematic necessity in going from one thing to another. So to claim that chance is doing everything is not really what we mean by science. Now, generally science doesn't deal with consciousness. Science deals mainly with molecules, atoms, and so forth, things that are perceptible to the senses. Of course, all science also has its subjective element. I mean, the concepts of science, the laws of physics, for instance, they're not found written in the sky. Newton's laws are not anywhere in the universe to be found. Right? They are concepts. They are ideas that scientists utilize to explain empirical evidence. But anyhow, I'm going to present to you the ancient theory of evolution, which is probably the origination, or the original idea of evolution on this earth, that comes from very ancient times. And it's called the theory of reincarnation. You've all heard of reincarnation, you know what that is, right? Sometimes it's called transmigration of the soul, or metempsychosis in Greek. That the living entity, according to the theory of reincarnation, goes through all the different species of life, and can come to the human form, and also in certain in our tradition, they can also go back to other forms of life. And each form of life represents a different stage of conscious development, from the bacterium or the microbe to the human being, and all the stages in between. There are different representations of the manifestation of consciousness in a more or less covered or unveiled form. So the condition, the pure state of consciousness, and then the conditioned state of consciousness are there. And there's different stages, the conditioned state of consciousness exists in different grades. Now, this idea of reincarnation, of course, is based upon the foundation of the eternality of the soul. There's an eternal principle. And consciousness is related to the soul in the same way that sunlight is related to the sun globe. Consciousness, we can all experience consciousness. The soul, what is that? That is the seat, or the origin of consciousness, from which consciousness is emanating, or we could say is the ground upon which consciousness is sitting, the spirit soul. So how do we know there's a soul? Well, just like how do you know there's a sun? You can be sleeping in your room, all of a sudden light comes pouring in your window and you say, oh, the sun is up, right? You understand automatically. So same way we feel we are conscious, then we can understand what is the source, what is the origin of that, what is the foundation of that. That's the soul, or the spiritual plane. Now, this eternality of the soul is found mentioned in the Bhagavat Gita. You've heard of the Bhagavad Gita? Is anyone not familiar with that book? You've not heard of it?
No,
Huh, sorry? Not heard of it. Bhagavad Gita? Yeah.
I haven't heard of it.
I haven't heard of it either.
No.
Okay. Bhagavad Gita is one of the most important books in India, Indian philosophy and religion. It's like the Bible, you could say, of India, of Hinduism or of Vedic culture. It's a part of a larger work called the Mahabharata, which is a historical account of the ancient times. The planet was once called Bharat, and Mahabharata represented the entire planet, the entire Earth planet, and the history of that time. And that, according to the internal chronology of the Vedas, that occurred about 5,000 years ago, that the Mahabharata war, the war of the Kurukshetra took place. And in that battle, the absolute truth, the highest conception of the absolute, is considered to be personal. And that personal concept of the absolute is called Bhagavan. Bhagavan means who possesses all opulences. And the Bhagavad Gita is the dialogue between Bhagavan, who is also called Krishna, and his devotee, his friend, who is called Arjuna. And it describes the entire, in a capsule form, the entire philosophy of India, of Vedic culture. Right, from the understanding of the soul to the understanding of the ultimate purpose of life. Anyhow, in that Bhagavad Gita, and I recommend that anyone who has not had a chance to read it, they take a look at it and try to allow that perspective, to be a part of your understanding of reality of things. Anyhow, in the second chapter it says, "Na tvaham, na tve aham, chatu asnasam, na tvam neme jagadibihi, na chaiva na bhavishyama, sarve vasyam atha param." In Sanskrit, this is the Sanskrit language. And it says, never was there a time when you, I, or all these things did not exist. Just as we exist in the present, so have we existed in the past and shall continue to exist in the future. So this is the foundation, this is the basis upon which the whole idea of reincarnation is to be founded, in the eternality of the self. Now, how do we come to this idea that the self is eternal? Is there any evidence of that? Any evidence that something could be eternal? What could be eternal? Do we have any evidence of anything that's eternal?
Energy.
Everything.
The energy cannot be created or destroyed.
Well, but they have a Big Bang, right? So let's try to understand what something can be eternal. Well, here it is given an example in the Bhagavad Gita itself is explained. And it says, Dehinosmin yata dehe komaram yovanam jara tata dehantara praptir dhiras tataram vijate. And the meaning is that as the living entity passes through bodily changes of childhood, youth, and old age, it similarly attains another body at death. The wise are not deluded by this. So what is this saying? Everyone has experience in their own lives that at one time you were in a body about this big, and maybe even smaller at one point, right? And then gradually you grew up into a young child, and now a young person, and eventually you'll become an older. And even though scientists will tell us that every 7 years or so, the entire cellular structure of the body is exchanged for new matter. In scientific terms, they call it anabolism, catabolism, and metabolism. Anabolism means the cells are being built up from new material. Catabolism means the ones that are there are being torn down. And metabolism is the process of maintaining that process. Of building up, tearing down, and the maintenance of that whole system. So what this is saying is that what I'm calling, what I identify as myself, this body, when I say, here I am, this is me. How can, which part of that body, which body is me actually? You understand? Which body? When I say this is me, or here I am, which body am I referring to? If the body is in a constant state of flux, let's say the wheat in the field, that's different from me. Everybody says that's different from my body, no? Or the potato on the table. Yet when I take that what is not me and eat it, it becomes me. When we eliminate waste from our body, whatever coming from the food and also from the body will go out. So we're taking things in, and it's becoming part of the body, and that part of the body is also going out and leaving us. And like this, there's a constant flux. Just like in a river, the Mississippi River or the Ganges River, the water that's flowing through the river is constantly changing. Yet we identify it in a particular way. This is the Ganges, this is the Mississippi. So some kind of identity is there within the flux of change that is going on in the world. And that identity remains as it is. I mean, I may be a child and my mind may change and my understanding of things will change, but basically I maintain the same identity throughout my life. Of course, sometimes we get a nickname when we're children, and we don't use that when we get older. But basically, we maintain the same identity. If you get a social security number when you're a kid, they identify you by that throughout your whole life, right? So the identity is remaining the same, but what is that? So this idea is being given in the Bhagavad Gita, that there is something that remains unaffected by change, and that is what we call the eternal, which is not affected by the changes of the physical world. So it doesn't, Bhagavad Gita is not based upon merely faith, blind faith. The things that it talks about, all these things of reincarnation and so forth, they're not a matter of blind faith. There's explanations given, about how everything is occurring. And if we have a little bit of patience to try to understand these teachings, we'll find that there's much reasoning, much systematicity, necessity involved in understanding the different principles that are presented there. All right, then. Now, we can also see here the principle of reincarnation in its nascent form, because already we're changing bodies, from the child body to the youth body to the old body, right? We're already changing bodies, you could say, in one lifetime. So similarly, at the time of death, the soul, the eternal soul, will go to another body under certain conditions. So at death, the identity with the body is completely lost. When we die, we completely leave the body behind, right? The dead body is different from the living body. How is it different? I remember once one sannyasi like myself or ourselves, he was talking to someone about the identification with the body, that why you're identifying with your body. I said, when I was talking to a gentleman, and he said, if your wife died, you're so attached to her body. But if your wife died, would you sleep with her for another night in the bed? Oh, no. The body becomes repulsive if it's dead, right? If the person has left the body, it becomes something repulsive. What we're so attracted to when it's alive, when the consciousness is present, when the soul is present, becomes something repulsive, becomes something putrefied when it dies. So something is maintaining the body, keeping it going. Another idea is that we say that the body is being held up, right, by muscles and bones and tendons and whatnot. But if you become unconscious, what happens? This body will just collapse on the ground. So consciousness is a force in the body. When the consciousness is there, the body will stand up and it'll do so many things. As soon as that consciousness leaves, then the body collapses. So it's not just the molecular and bone tissue and so forth that is holding things up. The body has a certain ground or foundation upon consciousness, and it's absolutely necessary for the body to be what it is and to function as it does. So when at the time of death, now the philosophy of the Gita says that at the time of death, the soul leaves the body, but it doesn't leave the subtle body. Now there are two types of bodies. There's the gross body, which is the body that can be sensed by hearing, smelling, tasting, seeing, and touching. The five sense objects. That makes up the gross body. But there's also a subtle body within the gross body. That's called mind, intelligence, and ego. Manas, buddhi, and ahankar in Sanskrit. Now modern science doesn't include these parts when it studies reality. It excludes mind, intelligence, ego, and what to speak of consciousness. So all these things are also part of the reality. It's not that we can eliminate mind or say that, well, mind is an epiphenomenon of matter. That hasn't been proved. That hasn't been shown. How does one explain what is not conscious or not mental and give rise to mentality? Anyhow, so Gita doesn't take that approach. They say, no, mind is there. It's also an element. Intelligence, ego, these are all elements of reality. And they must all have their categorical representation in our knowledge. So at the time of death, it says that the gross body is left behind, but the subtle body, made up of the mind, intelligence, and ego, that is what travels out of the body. And according to its proclivities and karma means it's the actions and reactions that it accumulated during its life. That carries it over into the next incarnation, the next body that it will take. And this whole process of going from birth to death, and then birth and death, like that whole process is called samsara, which is sort of like a circle of birth and death, that keeps one in the material sphere, the sphere of material existence. Now, another interesting thing that we find in the scripture, in the Padma Purana, there's a very interesting explanation here of the different types of life. It says that it actually enumerates how many forms of species or life there is. It says there are 8,400,000 species of life. And now that's an amazing number in itself. How they came up with that, I'm not quite sure. That would require a lot of investigation and probably make a good research topic. But then it also categorizes the numbers, the different forms of life. For instance, it says, Jalaja Navalakshani Stavara Laksha Vimsati Krimayo Rudra Sankyaka Pakshinam Dasa Lakshanam Trismal Lakshani Pashavaha Chatur Lakshani Manushaha. And the meaning is that there are 900 kinds of aquatics, 900,000 kinds of aquatics in the sea. There are 2 million kinds of trees and plants. 1,100,000 kinds of insects and reptiles, 1 million kinds of birds, 3 million kinds of four-legged beasts, and 400,000 kinds of human beings. Now, you may say, well, where are the 400,000 types of human beings on this planet? In fact, this is from the Padma Purana. The species of life here are not only for the Earth planet, they are also for all the other planets. These species exist not only on this planet, but they had knowledge about other planets also. So this is an enumeration they give. Now this is all, you can see there's some specific knowledge being given here. It's not just, making up some numbers. There is a way that these were derived. There's a whole system based upon what they call the gunas, the three modes of material nature. And there's a system of science in the Vedas that's called Sankhya. Sankhya is accounting, a measuring process, measuring science of measurement and counting. And that whole system is given in the Sankhya philosophy. So these numbers are arising from the basic principles of Sankhya philosophy. And again, this is something that I haven't gone into calculating how these numbers arose, but that would also make an interesting study. And then the next principle we want to speak about, so we've covered the eternality of the soul and the reincarnation and the different species of life. Now, what is this matter? What is matter, according to this conception? And matter can be explained as undeveloped consciousness. A product of conditioning of the consciousness by the three modes of material nature. Three modes of material nature means they're called Sattva, Raja, and Tama. Sattva means goodness, Tama, ignorance, and Raja, passion. We can interpret those in different ways. Sometimes I like to think of it in terms of what I told before: anabolism, catabolism, and metabolism. Anabolism is a building up or creating. That's Raja. Catabolism is a tearing down. That's Tama. And metabolism is the maintenance. That's Sattva. So these three principles are always acting in the world. There's a creation, annihilation, and a maintenance going on all the time. Just like I said, within the body or within the earth itself. We can see the trees, they're growing every year, and they die during the winter, and then they grow again. And the whole process of growth is actually a process of creating and destroying, creating and destroying, creating and destroying. So then, next was that matter as undeveloped consciousness also exists in 8 divisions. And I mentioned those briefly before. Here in the Gita it was explained as Bhumir, Apanalo Vayu, Kamano Buddhirevacha, Ahankara, Itiyame, Bina Prakriti Ashtada. It means that earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, ego are the 8 divisions of the illusory potency in this world. Illusory potency means that consciousness is, in a very real sense, covered. How do we understand the covering of consciousness? When does consciousness become covered? What is the meaning of covering of consciousness? Well, it's like, so let's say you never learned how to ride a bike. Now the ability to learn to ride a bike is there in you. Most people, they would have that ability is there. But without actually having practiced it, you won't be able to ride one. Right? The way you learn how to ride a bike is to get on and ride it. And then you realize, oh, I can do it. You can balance, in other words. The intelligence to be able to balance like that comes to you. And so you have the ability to ride a bike. Now, I know there are many people in the older generation who have absolutely no idea what a computer, how to operate a computer. They have absolutely no idea. But for you, it's very simple. You've all grown up with computers. You know exactly how to do with it. But for others, they would be complete blank. I know my mother or somebody like that, she could never operate it. So consciousness, it doesn't always manifest itself fully in all circumstances. The intelligence of doing things. We don't know how to do that. Just like riding cars. Nowadays it seems a very simple thing. I was thinking also the other day about this GPS system, that they have now, the little screens that tell you exactly where you're going. Sometimes I think, how do we ever drive without those things? How do we ever find out where to go? Right? They're so useful. You think how I could have ever driven without them. Yet, I came through that period where they didn't have those things. Or telephones. Telephones now allow us to contact people all over the world. Previously, they didn't have telephones. So, consciousness is affected by the things that we have, that we interact with. And so in this way, consciousness can become conditioned by the surroundings, by what it's in, what it's involved with. And so these 8 energies, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and ego, are also conditioning factors on consciousness. We may happen to be in human bodies, and so we experience things in a human way. But what happens if we were in another type of body? We would have to experience it that way. We would have a more limited type of consciousness, a more limited experience of life. The consciousness wouldn't be ultimately affected by that, but by the conditioning, by the conditions put on it, it would have to act in that way. Just like you can't go as fast as a car by walking. You get in the car and then your speed increases. So according to the situation we're in, consciousness allows us to utilize that and to get more or less experience or faster speeds or whatever it may be. And then what is the meaning of this division, these 8 divisions? Earth, water, fire, what is this? What is this? What do these correspond to? Why are they there? And how is it related to the conditioning of consciousness? So it's explained in the Vedas that the earth is the most dense of all the categories of consciousness, of conditioning. Earth allows us to, has 5 sense qualities to it. It can be touched, it can be smelled, it can be tasted, it can be seen, and it makes noise. It can be heard. Earth doesn't mean necessarily dirt, but anything that's solid like that. A vibration can be found in it. And then that's earth. Then water. Water has all the qualities except smell. It will have taste. It will have, you can see it, you can touch it, and so forth and so on. But now, fire will have 2 less qualities. It won't have smell and it won't have taste. Fire. And then air will have will have sound and touch, but it won't have smell, taste, or sight. And like that, the different elements. Now when you get to mind doesn't have any of the sense qualities that the grosser elements have. Right? Mind is a very fine substance, refined substance. We can't see it, we can't smell it, we can't taste it, so forth. All those sense perceptions are not available for mind. Yet we can't say that we don't have a mind, otherwise we'd be in trouble. And the intelligence. The difference between mind and intelligence, mind is based upon understanding, choosing, either or. And intelligence is the function that determines the consequences of our choices. We can make a choice. Mind allows us to make choices or to make determinations. But to inductively understand the consequences of those choices, that is the function of the intelligence. So I have a choice to go to the store and take the candy bar without paying for it, or I can think if I do that I'm going to get in trouble. So that's the intelligence coming in and saying, no, don't do that. Something like that. Mind intelligence. And then the ego, here is explained as false ego or ahankar. Now, this is a very important point in the whole development of the material body and the material existence, ahankar or ego. Now that's the point of singularity or identity of ourself. But it's called false or ahankar. False ego means that I am the doer. Ahankar, I am the doer. So the idea of ahankar or false ego is that I am the predominator over what I call the material energy. When I take the position of being the dominator or the lord of all I survey, you can say it in a very simple way, then the material energy presents itself before me. Now, what is this saying? It says that there is another ego besides this false ego that is not in this position of lording it over or exploiting the resources of the environment. There is another ego beyond that kind of mentality. And that ego is the pure ego, the pure consciousness. That pure consciousness has the relationship of being subordinate to the matrix of consciousness that is embedded within. The higher matrix of consciousness, sometimes called the super soul or superconscious. And that superconsciousness also has a higher matrix in which it is embedded. That is called Bhagavan. We just mentioned in Bhagavad Gita. This word Bhagavan refers to Bhagavad. And Gita means song, or the words of Bhagavan. The song of Bhagavan, song of God, you can say. And there are different levels like that of hierarchy consciousness. And the spiritual or the pure consciousness of the individual is connected with that higher platform, which is not within the realm of knowledge. Let's say it's not the type of knowledge that we can calculate, that we can go after, that we can pursue. It's not knowledge that is pursued by us. The knowledge of that plane is revealed. It comes to us. The knowledge of this world, we have to go toward it. We have to try to grasp it. But the knowledge of that world, it comes to us. It's called revelation, revealed. And there are certain circumstances in which that happens. But in order to enter that higher world, one has to give up this whole idea of exploitation, of being dominant, the dominator, and understand that there is something beyond our knowledge. There's an existence beyond our knowledge, and that is not irrational or not dumb, but it also is a plane of knowledge, but it's a different type of knowledge. They call that Advaiyan or transcendental knowledge or whatever. One can enter that, but he has to learn how to make this transition between these two fields. Now, as long as one doesn't make that transition into the higher plane, into pure consciousness, then he has to remain within this cycle of repeated birth and death. But if he can find that point by which he can cross over this material sphere of domination, then he can get what they call moksha, or liberation from it, from samsara, and enter into the spiritual realm. And the whole process of bhakti yoga, there are different forms of yoga presented in the Bhagavad Gita, jnana yoga, hatha yoga. Maybe you've heard of some of these different forms of yoga. But Bhagavad Gita recommends this bhakti yoga, the yoga of dedication. Not to be an exploiter, but to be a dedicator. Dedicator means devotion, dedication of your life to something higher than yourself. Now we may say, well, what kind of, is such a thing possible? Is there such a reality as a life of complete dedication? We're all living a life of, enjoyment, trying to find whatever enjoyment we can in this world. Is it possible to live a life of without that? It doesn't include that element within it of enjoyment, of selfish enjoyment, let's say. So, I think the best example of the importance of that kind of life and the significance and the prominence of that kind of life is found in the soldiers. Idealistically speaking, what does a soldier do? He puts his life on the line, right? He goes to war. Supposedly, if we have a just war, I don't want to judge any particular war, but in general, in a just war, for the defense of his country, the defense of his family, for the freedom of his country. He goes and he puts his life on the line. He's ready to give up everything. He's ready to give up everything for what? Now, he says for freedom, but whose freedom? It's not his freedom. For everyone's freedom. He's willing to sacrifice his entire life, his family, his children, his country, his friends. Here we find a complete dedication, unselfish dedication to something that is intangible, apparently, and that he doesn't even get any reward for. He doesn't get the freedom by dying. And freedom, what is that? Is it a tangible thing? As far as how we are living, but as an idea, as an ideal, it was something quite intangible. And yet people are doing that. And that is an essential aspect of our present civilization. Without it, we would not have the kind of civilization we have today. We would not have a civilization of freedom. We would not have the kind of ability to learn and do what we want in this world, in this culture. And some places may not have that. So it is a foundation. That principle of dedication is a foundation, a very important foundation of our life. But now the Vedic conception is that not that you just simply give up all material enjoyment. There is another world. There is another way of living, but it's a way that is not involved in exploitation. It's not that simply you die, you give up your life and you die, and then nothing else is there. No, there is a higher plane of dedication, of service. That also exists in the higher world, but it's of a different nature, inverted nature, you could say, from this world. Now that's an important concept, inverted nature, because here's where the key between the ancient theory of evolution, of subjective or conscious evolution, and the Darwinian theory of objective evolution comes in, where we will be able to see clearly how these two have become related, inversely related. Anyhow, this inversion of existence is explained also in the Gita, in the 15th chapter. Urdhva Moolam Adakshakam Ashvatam Prabhavyam Chandamsi Yasya Pranani Yastam Veda Savedavit. And it is said in the scriptures that this material world is like a peepal tree. Peepal tree means, what do they call it? Banyan tree.
Banyan tree, yeah.
Banyan tree. Roots up, branches down, endless yet transient. So, the banyan tree, its roots grow from the branches. The roots go down into the ground. Generally, the roots are coming in the ground and they're pushing the tree up, right? Well, the banyan tree, the roots are going down into the ground. And also, we can think of, if a tree is growing near a lake, right? The reflection of the tree in the lake, we'll see the branches going down and the roots coming up. But it's only the reflection of the actual tree where the roots are going down and the branches are going up. So what this is saying is that the material world is just like that reflection of the other world. The world of exploitation is the reflection of the world of dedication above it. And the spiritual world and the material world are reflected like that. Now it's interesting that this same idea of inversion is found in the famous philosopher Hegel in his Phenomenology of Spirit. He goes through this section in his book. I don't know if anyone has ever read that. It's a very difficult book. But it has the whole history of consciousness, or what we like to call the archaeology of consciousness, or the anatomy of consciousness, from the plane of sense perception all the way to the plane of spirit, and the absolute. Anyhow, he goes through a section in there also about the inverted world, which is a very important concept for understanding how one goes from one level of reality to another. Now, we can see this connection here with Darwin. Now, Darwin is saying that the body is evolving from the bacterium to the bear. That's the objective plane of evolution, right? But the Vedas are telling us about the subjective, the consciousness evolution. The plane of consciousness is evolving through different stages of enlightenment. And those different stages of enlightenment of consciousness are reflected in the different forms of life that we see on this planet. Now, this means that consciousness is existing in every form of life, definitely. And without the consciousness, there would not be a life, even of an organism such as a microbe or a bacterium. Now, this idea has, although very ancient, has gained modern traction, we could say. many modern scientists, especially with the development of quantum mechanics and so forth, that have brought back this idea of consciousness, the role of consciousness in reality, material reality. And here's one quote from a very famous scientist who lived during the time of Einstein, and he was one of the first persons to apply Einstein's principles in a practical way for actual measuring, for determining the effects of relativity by looking at the different astronomical phenomena to see how light was actually bending or showing a divergence from what would be expected in an ordinary classical Newtonian sense. So he was a very brilliant scientist, philosopher, and his name is Sir Arthur Eddington. And he was one of the few men, the first man to understand Einstein's theory of relativity.
His name?
Arthur Eddington. And he said this, he said, "We have found a strange footprint on the shores of the unknown. We have devised profound theories, one after another, to account for its origins. At last we have succeeded in reconstructing the creature that made the footprint, and lo, it is our own." What he is saying here is that the activities of the that we find in the material world are actually the activities that are going on within our consciousness. What we see in the world is imprint made by our conceptions of them, our thoughts of them. The world, or the reality before us, the objective reality before us, what is that? How do we say what that is, except by what we think it is? Isn't it? Can we remove our thoughts from the world as it is? What is the world as it is? What do we call that? Isn't it our idea? Is it possible to have a world, or to talk of a world, or to refer to a world that has nothing to do with our ideas of it? Right? So what we see in the world is actually what is within us, and that is also explained in these Vedas. Amavan Mandite Jagat. As you are, so you will see the world. So Eddington was saying this: we have found a footprint, we're analyzing it, and that analysis is coming from us. And what is it then? It is us that we're seeing. The footprint is ours. The impression we have made in this world, the conception we have developed of this world is coming from us, our own consciousness, the actions of our own consciousness. He further said, "It is difficult for the matter-of-fact physicist to accept the view that the substratum of everything is of mental character. But no one can deny that mind is the first and most direct thing in our experience, and all else is remote inference. We have most direct experience of our own selves, our own consciousness. And then we have experience of what is the content of consciousness, what is the object of consciousness." Now, this may seem like what they call idealism. Idealism, everything is in the mind. But this is not what Eddington was saying. This is a misconception of his ideas, actually. Just like we were talking about earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and ego, these were all considered part of the material energy. Mind, in other words, is in the material energy. It's not that it's in me. Mind is part of the material world, the material reality. In the same way, Eddington is saying here that consciousness is objective, is in the object. It's not in something in me. It is in the object itself. The matrix of consciousness is supporting the material reality. So what we know as the objective world is precisely mirrored in consciousness. This was his idea. And that the behavior of fundamental particles in quantum mechanics has been completely discarded in quantum mechanics. You can't speak now of a particle, a mass particle, being in a particular place at a particular time and in a particular state of motion. That is no longer possible according to quantum mechanics. We can only speak about probabilities, what we expect to find. And the presence of the consciousness, the observer, is absolutely necessary to instantiate or individualize a particular measurement, without which the wave function merely describes an infinite probability of where the particle is or what it is doing. It's called a wave function. and it explains an infinite possibility from minus infinity to plus infinity, or from 0 to infinity, of what possible values that whatever we're talking about may take. It's like that. The whole ground of empiricism has been what would you say? Uprooted by quantum theory. And this was not completely unintentional, as we'll see. So the father of quantum mechanics, his name is Max Planck. You may have heard of him, Planck's constant. And he was the one who first came up with this idea of quantization of energy, that things don't go continuously, but they go in jumps. And he said here, as a man who has devoted his whole life to the most clear-headed science, to the study of matter, I can tell you, as a result of my research about atoms, this much: there is no matter as such. All matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force which brings the particle of an atom to vibration and holds this most minute solar system of the atom together. We must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. This mind is the matrix of all matter. This was Planck. Now, most people who read quantum mechanics or the physics books, they never hear such a thing. They never hear this. But this was Planck's basic understanding of reality, was based upon this matrix of mind that was existing, again, objectively, not within our mind, but as the actual objective reality. So, and he also made this quote, I think that's interesting. He said, I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as a derivative of consciousness. We cannot get behind consciousness. Everything that we talk about, everything that we regard as existing, postulates consciousness. Of course. Whatever we postulate, who's postulating? Who's posing it? Who's positing it? It is a thought of the observer or the scientist. There would be no science without the scientist. To talk of a world existing before the scientist came into being, where does that exist except in the mind of the scientist? He assumes there is a world that was there before he existed, but that's his assumption. That's his presupposition. It's an interesting idea given by a philosopher named Willard Sellers. What is that again? I call it the myth of the given. The myth of the given. The world that seems to be given to us is there. We are born and we open our eyes and it's there. It's given to us. He said, but that's a myth. That's a myth that it is given like that. Because what is the meaning? What is the actual thought behind the given? The given is what is posited by the mind as not posited. What is thought by the mind as not being thought by the mind. He said this is what the given is. You can follow the intricacies of that idea. The given is what is posited as not posited. It's something that we project out there as not being projected by us, as being given to us. That's another way of understanding the given. We can say it's given, it's there for us to perceive. Or we can say we are thinking it's there and then not thinking that we thought it was there. Well, first of all, we think it is there, because how can you speak of the given unless we're saying, I'm thinking this is given to me? Kant made this statement that everything we say is affected by this I think. We generally leave out the I think part of our statements when we say the world is made of molecules and atoms. We don't say I think the world is made of molecules. Of course, the I think has to be there. Whenever I say that the fundamental particles of nature are quarks and various other elementary particles, we leave out the I think. And so people are saying, oh, is that the way it is? Without understanding it is a personal opinion of an individual. It's the idea of an individual, of a scientist, of a philosopher, or whatever. So we leave out the I think, and that's how we posit something. I think it, and then I just simply say it is, without using the I think. So I posit something, and then I posit it is not posited by me. That's how we do it. We just leave out, by positing it is not posited by me, I just leave out the I think and say it is. But it's always followed by the I think. It's always preceded by the I think. That is the point. Then, so far as this universality or the objectivity of conscious matrix upon which reality is based, we also find that in the Katha Upanishad, where it explains Nityo Nityanam Chaitanas Chaitanana Eko Bohanam Kaman. It means that besides the subjective consciousness of the finite beings, of the many finite beings, there is also one consciousness who is supporting or grounding all of the other finite consciousnesses, the many. The one grounds the many. And it says, among all the eternal conscious beings, there is one who supplies the needs of everyone else, or supplies the ground. The wise souls who worship him in his abode obtain everlasting peace, others cannot. Then, how much time do we have?
We're done.
We have time?
Yes.
Then here's another very, like I was mentioning Hegel, I've found a great deal of insight into spiritual realization or spiritual reality through a study of Hegel. And in his Phenomenology of Spirit, which is one of the most important philosophy books ever written, he says that in the very beginning of his, what would you say, the preface to his book, he says that the essential point is to understand that ultimate reality, or the absolute, is subject. As much as we understand the absolute to be substance, generally, most people, practically everyone, even for the whole history of philosophy, have understood the absolute as substance, as a thing, as a substance. What would you say? A substance.
As an existence.
A being. A being. But he said, as much as we understand the absolute to be being, we must understand it to be subject. A subject. Not a substance, but a subject. In other words, a person. A consciousness. Consciousness means there's a person. You can't have consciousness without having personality. So, in other words, to understand that the absolute is sentient. Yeah, senses. It is sense. A sentient being. And Hegel called this absolute, this sentient absolute, the idea. The absolute idea. And his absolute idea was self-conscious. It's not just an idea in the brain, in other words. The idea for Hegel was a self-conscious entity. What do I call entity? Difficult to call it anything like that, but I call it idea. So the sentience or consciousness is, in a particular instant, in the instant of a finite being, what we call the concept or consciousness. Now, it's interesting relation between consciousness and concept. Because what is our consciousness of the world? Our consciousness is our concept of the world. What we mean by our consciousness of the world is our concept of the world. How we understand the world. Is it? Now, a living entity is therefore an existing concept. This was Hegel's definition of a living entity. Is an existing concept. Therefore, a consciousness and a living entity are inseparable. If a living entity is an existing concept, that each one of us has a particular concept of the world. We are all, therefore, in our consciousness, or as our consciousness, we are concepts that are at the same time existing. Now, a concept must have its content. You can't have a concept, it's always a concept of something, in other words. There's no such thing as a pure concept without being a concept of something, isn't it? So the concept has its object, its objectivity, as well as its subjectivity. And this is what is the essential nature of an organism or a living entity. There is a concept and there is its body, its content. And according to the concept or the consciousness, the body will manifest accordingly. The particular body, whether it be the consciousness of a bacterium, which is pretty meager, or the consciousness of an animal, or the consciousness of a plant. These are all different levels of consciousness we can find. Even in Aristotle, we'll find different descriptions of the various levels of consciousness, whether they are nutritive or vegetative or perceptive or rational. He explained these things in his philosophy also. Now, I wanted to make a statement here about the intelligent design. You know, this is a very, around, I don't know how many people have heard of that, intelligent design. Have you all heard of that? Yeah. That's like, mainly, different people are now presenting that idea. And the whole idea of intelligent design that is found there in living entities, in a way, we accept that. This is also a similar idea, but a little different also, much more detailed. I mean, yeah, you don't find this kind of explanation in idea. They certainly don't promote reincarnation and so forth. But I don't know, whenever I hear the term intelligent idea, I always think of some intelligence acting on matter and designing it in a particular way from outside. So the concept that I'm presenting here is that there is intelligence inherent in everything, and in every organism. It's an internal thing, intrinsic thing. And it is what organizes or unifies the organism around that particular concept. Anyhow, this is another point that requires a little deeper thought to understand how that all works. Now Kant, Immanuel Kant, he also spoke about the proper philosophical conception or comprehension of an organism. And he said it was not a mechanical system. He said there would never be a Newton of a blade of grass, his own way of saying that. It would never be able to, we would never be able to explain matter, or an organism rather, in terms of its material components, or an aggregation of its material components, by the very nature of the organism that differs, makes it different from a non-organismic matter. What is that difference? So he said the organism contains what he called a Naturzweck, in German, Naturzweck. Means a purpose. It has an internal purpose. Of course, the purpose of every organism is to survive, right? Survival. So there is this we don't find in non-organismic or non-living matter. That there's some intent and purpose. So this purpose is creating the organism, and the body of the organism also fulfills the intent or the purpose. The body of the organism acts in such a way as to maintain the identity of the organism or the longevity of the organism, and the organism itself is acting to create the material and acting in such a way as to preserve itself. So there's a kind of a loop. Kant called that a cause, that a living organism is distinguished by the fact that it is the cause and effect of itself. Now, a billiard ball, for instance, will move, but not by its own purposes, not by its own initiative. It will move only when it is impelled and pushed by something external to it. But a living entity, an organism, will move by its own automatic impulse. This cause that produces its own effect, and effect that produces its own cause, is called self-determination. Self-determination means it determines its own behavior. Now, in another word, we call this free will. Free will means that I determine what I'm going to do. I don't have to be impelled by somebody else, right? This will be what we mean by free will. I can do what I want by my own internal inspiration or intention. I can do something. I don't need something outside of me to tell me or to direct me or to enforce what I do. So this self-determination, this free will, is the primary, or this cause that is the effect that is the cause, is the primary ingredient of life. And that's why we can never make a living organism by something else other than life itself. Without that free will, without that self-determination, matter in itself cannot be combined outside of that free will to make a living organism. It will never happen. And scientists have never been able to do that, have they? They've never been able to combine, although they know all the molecules, biomolecules, whatever, and the structure of the cell and everything, they can't take all the parts, put them together into a test tube and make life. They can't do it. Even if they took a living cell, put it in a test tube with some nutrient solution, took one cell, put it in a test tube with some nutrient solution, and put a little pin in that cell, such that all the ingredients of the cell would come out. And that cell would die, right? But if they tried to put all those ingredients back into a little membrane, they wouldn't be able to bring that cell back to life. Because the life is not caused by something other than itself. The matter doesn't cause life. The life causes the matter, and the matter it utilizes for its own sustenance. So we predict with complete confidence that it will never be possible for them to make life artificially. Never. Life comes from life only. And that is a scientific observation. Life always comes from life. It doesn't come from matter. Rather, matter comes from life. Now you must say, what? How does matter come from life? Yet, you've seen these redwood trees. Where does that come from? All that biomass that is being produced because there's a little seed that began there with a life force in it. And he created that. They found now that there are microbes, tiny, tiny microbes, distributed throughout the planet, even below the surface of the earth. Everywhere, in the oceans, everywhere, these microbes. They're the predominant form of life on this planet. And they have a major contribution to the entire biosphere, the atmosphere. Not only that, but to the biomass, as I'm saying. They produce the oxygen in the air. All the matter that we're calling, that we identify with nature, is actually has its origin within a living organism. So we say that matter comes from life, life comes from life, and matter comes from life. And now, I want to give just one more thing, and this will close or summarize our whole discussion, and maybe give you something very tangible to think about regarding all these things. And I want to give the analogy of a book. Now, a book starts as a story, as an idea, right? An author has an idea, a story. And then he writes the book. Now, when we read the book, when we get the book in our hand, what do we see? We see some letters on the page, right? And then the letters form words, and the words form paragraphs, and the paragraphs form chapters, and the chapters form sections, and the sections form the book. And the whole thing together is coming from this idea. Now, when we have a book in our hand, is it possible for us to think that the book came from the letters, from the combining of A and then E and then B according to certain rules? Can we imagine a book being composed like that? Maybe. But it wouldn't be a very sensible thing, would it? It'd be very hard to create a story. We'd have to have some idea if we were going to combine the letters in that way to make a book, make a story, tell something, present an idea. There would have to be something that would combine those letters in that way to produce that. It's not just from an arbitrary combination of letters that we can expect that this book arose. So although the book is printed in letters, or produced in letters, alphabetical letters, we cannot say the letters are the source of the book. It is not that the book, the idea, the story, is based upon the letters, is it? Not really. Although the book as such would not exist without the letters being there. But we still can't say that the letters produce the book. In the same way, life is atomic. There are atomic and molecular analysis of life. But life is much more than just the atomic and molecular constituents of its body. It's also an idea, a concept. Although it seems to be resting on those things, actually those things are resting on the idea, on the concept. In the same way as the book. Thank you very much. What's that?
Stop this now.
Oh, I don't know if anybody
There's
likes
some
to be a
questions.
little late. Any questions, comments?
Yeah, that's a question.
Let this lady hear
That's,
this.
Earlier you were talking about bhakti yoga as the devotion of your life to this like greater good, but I guess I kind of miss like is it possible, and what is the good of it as a whole,
Well-
and for an individual?
yeah. Mara, would you like to say?
Can you repeat the question?
So, is it? I said, what good is it to devote your life to, like a bhakti, or just the devotion of something higher, instead of pursuing what your wants and desires are?
Love is basically, bhakti means love, dedication means love. There's no higher principle, no higher pleasure than to love. And to love completely means to love the Supreme, who is supplying everything to us, who is loving us so intensely that whatever we want, we are getting from that source. He's giving everything to us. We can't produce a grain of rice. We can't produce the oxygen that we breathe. We can't produce the light by which we see things. We can't produce our bodies or our own lives on our own. And all these things are given to us by some source, and who has intense love for us to give all those things to us. Can we give anything in return? Would that not be a most perfect love? That's the idea of bhakti.
Thank you.
Recently, I was watching a TED Talk, and I was from a guy named V.S. Ramachandran, and he's a neuroscientist at UC San Diego, and he does a lot of work with mirror neurons, and kind of what he discovered, like to just like shorten it down really short, is that when you anesthetize someone's arm, or when you cut, or when someone is missing a part of their body, and they observe someone who's being touched or being felt, that person will feel it every time. And that is explained by the fact that there's these things called like mirror neurons, and when you're observing me, the same part of your brain is firing as mine. And he described it as kind of a more like Lamarckian evolution, or like this kind of horizontal rather than this vertical Darwinian. And I was just wondering, like, what you thought of that concept and how that relates to the evolution of consciousness and what you were saying.
Well, yes, Darwinian evolution is being challenged on many fronts. And the idea of the environmental influence on evolution is not considered in Darwin's theory. Generally, it's all based on the internal mutations of the organism and then adapting to the environment. But the actual, how the environment is actually creating the different forms of organism, or the niches for which they're existing, that is not considered generally in his theory. So whatever we may, however we may interpret that as mirror neurons or, whatever other theories they have, there are several of them. That has to do with the objective, the more objective sense of evolution. Like we're saying, the consciousness, we're trying to present the idea that consciousness has its own fundamental effect and essential effect on what we are calling matter or material interactions, whether it be environmental or intra-organismic. They would all be part of the external explanation of things. Understand what I'm saying? The external explanation, whether the organism, the environment, or the environment organism, is all part of the externality of consciousness.
What's the difference between the external and what you're saying there,
And the internal.
and when you said that what you said is that matter is coming from life?
Yes.
Is that kind of seems like opposite or something? I don't
No, not really. In other words, matter is just like, how do we externalize our inner thoughts? How do we, by talking?
Yeah.
Sound. What is private to me, my internal thoughts, I make public by uttering some sound. So I am manifesting my thoughts through sound. And other ways of manifesting our thoughts. An architect will have a blueprint in his mind, he'll put it on paper, and then he will actually build it, manifest it. Okay? So that everything starts from the inner, but it can manifest. Now, how it does it, that's another question, but we see that process is going on all the time. And the living organism, we can see, just like our body is growing, because there's a life within it. Just take the life out, the body will stop growing, stop producing. Your nails are coming out from your hand. Oh, they're the fastest growing part of your body. Where are they coming from? That's matter. Without the life force there, they wouldn't manifest. The hairs on your body, hairs on your head, and so forth. Right? So matter is constantly being produced because of the life principle. What we're saying. Does someone else have a question? Yes?
I agree that obviously there's a huge hole in mainstream science, but my question is that I still see the same sort of hole in what you're saying. Although I believe most of what you said is true to me, I think. But how do you go? Essentially, the question is how do you go from 0 to 1? Why can't the evolution of intelligent consciousness from evolution to self-realization extend back into matter, inorganic life, being the same linear evolution of consciousness, and that matter would be just even more primitive or lower than insects or bacteria, and that all of it, including from the Big Bang, that they're not separate.
Yes, that's exactly right. I didn't get into that. That's exactly right. Because if consciousness is the matrix upon which matter is formed, then certainly matter also has its element of consciousness within it. Exactly. That's another aspect of the whole story. But that's also found in the Vedas.
Because that was the only discrepancy I felt.
Right.
in the conversation.
Very good. I'm glad you pointed that out.
Separating-
Very nice. But it was implied in what we said, as consciousness as the matrix of all reality, then certainly what so-called inanimate matter or dead matter also has an element of consciousness by which it is formed. And again, an atom, let's say, is an idea also of a scientist.
It has intelligence.
It has
You know,
intelligence.
certain bonds,
Yes.
things.
Not very manifested, but it does. It definitely has an action. Nowadays we understand atoms, or at least from the classical Bohr theory of the atom, there's a lot of action going on within the atom, or even from the theory of elementary particles. There's a tremendous amount of action going on within the atom. So it's alive in a certain sense, in that sense.
Yeah, and so the beginning of matter could be developed as the beginning of life also. That's still, you're not supposed to ask that question.
Right. But we have to understand it from the conscious point of view, not from the material point of view. That was what we're saying. That the consciousness may advance from matter to its pure state, pure consciousness, unconditioned consciousness. And it does that. That's what the whole process of reincarnation is, to gradually awaken the consciousness to its higher realization, which is only possible in the human form of life, actually. The other forms of life, consciousness is so much absorbed in matter that it doesn't understand its difference from that material plane, material manifestation, or material encrustment. Only in the human form of life we can make this distinction. We can understand, oh, wait a minute, I was a baby, I'm a boy, there's something else besides the body.
Is there room for more advancement?
I'm sorry?
Is there room for greater advancement of consciousness
Yes, beyond the body, certainly,
beyond the human body?
yes.
Sounds good to me.
That we tell more, that's the postgraduate study. Yes?
Well, as far as I follow what you're saying, it seems like consciousness directs matter, but the consciousness and matter come into existence simultaneously, or does consciousness precede matter? Does matter really come from consciousness, or are they just two things that exist in some sort of equilibrium?
Well, the books, the ancient scriptures on this subject say that consciousness precedes matter, that matter is a creation. The material energy is a created energy. It doesn't always exist. It's created and it's annihilated also. We find that in the, you'll find it in a book called the Srimad Bhagavatam, or Brahma Samhita, how the material creation comes about. So it's not an eternal thing. Although the substance of the material energy is created, that's called pradhan. That exists entirely as a potentiality, a state of potentiality, potential energy.
Time for one more question? Along those lines, we were just saying that, Maharaj was speaking earlier about empiric knowledge being an ascending process, that through our own efforts we're increasing our body of knowledge, and then there's another form of it which is descending, revelation. So my question, and you were talking just now, when that descends it'll be irresistible. So my question is, how can we tell the difference between actual divine revelation and delusion, or the products of our own mind? Somebody who's insane, Charles Manson, might be hearing voices and thinking that God's telling him to go out and kill people, for instance. How can we distinguish between divine revelation and the products of our own mind?
Well, there has to be a process, right? So that's also given in the Vedas, process for receiving revealed knowledge. We have to realize that there is, how do we know when knowledge is genuine and when it's not? When it's imaginary and rather or it's actual reality. How do we distinguish between reality and illusion, basically? So that will be based upon the process by which we know. The process by which we know. The process by which we are cultivating that knowledge. What is the process? This will determine whether it is illusory or real process. So now we have to understand what is the process. This is the main thing. If we want to understand the difference between illusion and reality, we'll have to understand what is the process that is required to understand the reality as distinct from the illusion. What is the process of knowledge? What is the process of knowing? Yes?
Just check something first.
you were speaking earlier, I think you said, it's very difficult for us to make any statements without putting the word I think in front of it. You said you always have to put that. That is what you said, right?
That was Kant's statement.
No,
Kant.
that was Kant's statement, that's not your statement.
Well,
It's not that he disagrees.
yeah, it seems reasonable. You have some objection to that?
It does seem reasonable, or it doesn't?
It seems reasonable.
Okay, so-
About material statements.
Yeah, so there is a little bit of an issue with that, because, like, if I say you're sitting in that chair,
Right.
I'm not saying I think. And if I was gonna say I think, you're saying the knowledge basically doesn't exist at that point. That's where you've gone with it. And if I have to say I think you're sitting in that chair, we've lost, we don't even know what knowledge is anymore.
We don't have,
We don't know what knowledge is, because how would you define knowledge? How do you know anything? If I don't know you're sitting in that chair, what can I know? So I'll make a little,
well, again, if we analyze the situation, what exactly is behind that statement, you are sitting in the chair, I know you're sitting in the chair, do you? I'll ask you the question, do you?
no, maybe I don't.
No,
Maybe I
no,
don't,
no,
but
no,
I'm saying
listen,
then how can you know anything?
listen. You are making certain assumptions in order to say that I'm sitting in this chair. I'll tell you what those assumptions are in a minute, all right? For instance, I mean, if you believe in scientific realism, you know what scientific realism is? That
Go for it.
your brain is made up of neurons, and those neurons are firing, and the only thing you're really perceiving are the firings of your neurons.
Okay.
And somehow or other, those neurons firing, the electrical currents that are being produced in your brain, they're associated with a particular idea of a thing that is producing those firings in your brain. And this thing that is producing those firings in your brain is also supposedly or assumed to be a bunch of atoms and electrons also, which are emitting photons, which are entering into your eye and stimulating the brain and so forth and so on, right? Now, the only thing you're actually experiencing are the firings of your neurons, the electrical currents in your brain, according to the scientific realist perspective.
I don't agree with
Okay.
that theory, by the way.
All right, but I'm saying we can analyze things in this way, that what you're assuming may not be correct, and may be misunderstanding or misconception, and basing your whole experiences upon that. Factually, I'm not sitting here. You don't know me. You can't see me. Once Socrates said, where shall we bury you? He said, first you have to catch me. And then you can bury me. So, many ways we can understand this thing. Not as simple as not a naive. We may assume a naive realism, that's called naive realism. To assume that what we see is what there is.
To assume that's all there is.
What's that?
That's to assume that's all there is.
I'm sorry?
To assume that's all there is.
To assume that's all it is.
Naive realism is what we see is all there is.
Any other question? Jonathan? Yes?
So,
Should we
so you're being
should we
saying
go on,
that,
or is it okay? Yes?
I guess I'm just curious
Sorry.
about what this can do for science. Like, what would science look like if it were to adopt this principle that you're talking about?
Yes, let's understand this one thing, that the modern society is a very recent thing, and this whole scientific conception of reality is a very recent thing. And we got along quite well without it for thousands of years before it came on the scene, and maybe even better, in the sense that, we didn't have pollution, air pollution, water pollution, atomic bombs and various ways of destroying one another. So that, to think that science is only pure benefit to mankind, I think that's a rather narrow idea of science, of what science can do. And people had science in the past also, and it wasn't based on atomic and molecular physics. They had an understanding of things. Just like I'm saying, modern science can't explain mind or intelligence or ego or consciousness or anything. It can't even explain life. So what exactly is our scientific knowledge? How much does it actually encompass? Just like I was saying, we can analyze a book in terms of its letters, but what value, how much value does that give us as far as understanding what the story is, or how the book was originated? That's a very limited type of knowledge. This is reductionism. Okay? Although there may be many benefits, there are also many drawbacks. And although it may seem very current and important to us, life got along without that kind of knowledge law for many, many thousands of years. And the whole civilization, the very civilization of which we are a part and which we enjoy, was based on something very different than what we understand today by modern science. And in the future, we will go on to whether that type of science continues or it is surpassed by other types of scientific knowledge. Isn't it reasonable?
I suppose, I mean, how would you see our understanding of evolution change then? I mean, not to say that there isn't other ways of understanding besides scientific ways, but it seems to me like so far it's been fairly fruitful in giving us.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I argue with people about this all the time. I said, you know, the people who developed science, the scientists who originally brought science to the world, were creationists. Basically, they were theists, or deists, or whatever. So there is no conflict between science and theology, or belief in something higher than the material nature. One can be a scientist. One can study the mechanics of things or the chemistry of things without having to say that, you know, life is explainable in those terms. Doesn't mean that you have to stop chemistry or you have to stop studying physics in order to allow those other thoughts to be part of our understanding of reality. Just like you don't have to give up study of lithography in order to understand that the book wasn't based upon the printed letters in the book. Lithography is there, grammar is there, and literary criticism is there. All those different levels of discourse continue to exist, although one cannot necessarily be used to explain the other. Lithography can't be explained to, the concepts or the discourse in the lithography can't be utilized in the discourse on literary criticism. But they go side by side, they can coexist with one another.
So you don't see necessarily Darwin's theory of evolution being bolstered by this?
No.
You know? So
I don't.
you
I
them
think
co-opting
I see
anyway?
Darwin's theory of evolution to be a false theory, a phantom theory, what they call phantom theory,
Okay.
like phlogiston.
Right. But fruitful, perhaps, nonetheless.
I think we'll take one more question and then.
I'm sorry?
You said there was a mechanism for evolution?
I'm saying they don't have a mechanism for evolution.
I just, what do you mean by mechanism exactly?
Oh, well, and basically, an articulated, step-by-step, systematic, explanation of how bacteria produce something other than bacteria.
Well, I mean, it starts off as this, molecular evolution, and like there was an RNA world hypothesis,
Right.
RNA proteins that converted to DNA, and that, formed the first cells, and then when cells replicate, they change, and like DNA can move around, viruses were formed,
Right.
just the replicating and changing, and basically changing the change of DNA passed on after duplication produces new types of cells. I mean, I would assume that at the beginning of evolution it wasn't necessarily a bacteria. I mean, we have bacteria today, but that's been evolving, for 3.5 billion years.
Okay.
Evolution. So
Well, that-
the first cells weren't actually bacteria.
Yeah.
They might have been archaic
Yeah.
or like
People are going to believe.
But so there's a mechanism proposed.
Well, no. I can disagree. that, what you're explaining is the neo-Darwinian theory of evolution, but that is being replaced after the developments of modern, biochemistry, the intense developments that have been going on in modern biochemistry. That whole picture has been displaced. The centrality of the DNA, the centrality of genes, that has been completely displaced. Displaced, but by epigenetic, the influences of epigenetic factors.
No, it's not displaced. I mean, I just.
Oh, okay, right. We may argue on this point, but the point is that there is an argument. There is an argument. It's not that everyone accepts that the basic genetic framework that was established by Crick is the predominant or only process.
No, I mean, like, the epigenetics is like, so you have your DNA, it changes.
No. Let me go on to a further point. One second. Let me go on to a further point. Okay. Now, as far as the DNA is concerned, now genetic studies have shown that although there are mutations within the DNA, there is also the genetic system stabilizes the DNA. In other words, any perturbations or mutations that occur are generally corrected. There's a self-correcting mechanism, and there are several levels of self-correcting mechanisms within the DNA molecule, so that the DNA molecule for a particular, say, a bacterium, and the DNA for, say, an amoeba. Now, they're completely different. What has to happen in order for the DNA of a bacterium to become the DNA of a bacterium is that you have to add more information to the DNA of the bacteria to get the amoeba. Now, where does that extra information come from? The mutation can change the structure of the DNA molecule, no doubt, but it doesn't add information to the DNA molecule that is necessary for the operation of an amoebic molecule. And that hasn't been explained, how that extra information comes in. They may say hybridization and duplication and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, DNA can be added to genomes.
Okay. We don't want to go into this, but let's say that there are arguments on both sides of this. Okay.
But, and epigenetics is included. I mean, it's just more modern that your actual what you do in your life can affect your DNA. Like that's new.
That's right.
But it doesn't change the theory. And like.
Not only that.
And it maybe it might not change your gametes, which is what you pass on to the next generation. It might change your actual DNA. It changes what's turned on in your body, what's turned off, but it might not, be inherited. But like, I know a couple years back they tried to create a cell just from like a minimum genome. I don't know if it
wasn't successful. It wasn't successful.
That'd be interesting.
It was a chemical reaction. They generated a chemical reaction, but they didn't generate a living organism. It didn't sustain itself. Life is a sustaining chemical reaction, if you want to see it in those terms, and they haven't been able to do that. It's sort of like trying to create a perpetuum mobile,
So you don't think a robot could become intelligent?
Well, we have to understand what a robot is.
Well, let's say we had a machine that could build a human being atom for atom, identical to me. Not conscious?
No, your robot exists because somebody's put some intelligence.
Well, yes, this is the thing with robots. You can put all kinds of transducers and photoelectric cells and things like that to detect what's in the environment, and the robot can act in relationship to the environment. But when the impulses from these various transducers and photoelectric cells and servo motors, etc., have to be interpreted by the robot, there's a computer inside there that is needed, a programmed computer that says if this impulse comes from that has to be done, if that impulse comes from that has to be done. This servo motor has to be activated, or that thing has to be activated, or it has to turn this way, or that way. So there is an intelligence in the robot, but it's an artificial one. That's put there by the intelligent programmer. So, without the intelligent program, that robot wouldn't be able to function. And it's only doing it by a rote system, a mechanical system of computation, not by an actual act of free will, which is only possessed by a thing that is the cause of itself, which is life. God,
Maybe your robot could make a robotic mouse. But not a real mouse.
I think you need a whole semester, Maharaj.
Yes, well, we said we advertise this as a series, that's why I said better put series there, because this cannot all be described in one talk. And if anyone is interested, like I said, please leave your information, now we can contact you, and we'll let you know about many future discussions on these topics.